We are going to go into our next presentation. Dr. Martin Entz will talk on smart livestock integration facilitates organic agriculture and a healthier food system. Martin is a professor of cropping systems and natural systems agriculture at the University of Manitoba. He leads the Glenlee long-term rotation study, Canada's oldest organic versus conventional farming systems experiment, which is heading into its 30th growing season. The goal of this research program is to discover new ways of farming ecologically and to empower farmers with the knowledge and other tools required to design organic farming systems adapted to where they live. Farmers are active partners in many of his graduate student projects, and prior to entering academia, Martin worked as a farm manager and a research agronomist. Martin.
Thank you very much, Doug. I appreciate that. I'm going to share my slides. And so, Doug, I'm just going to check that you can hear me and see my slides.
Yes, can hear you and see them.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I'll get right into it because I think I have 15 minutes. So I don't know if you can see the title there, so I'll just make that smaller. I'm talking about organic agriculture, which occupies 2% of Canadian land. So it's definitely a niche production system. But to quote Albert Howard and Eve Belfour, Mother Earth never attempts to farm without livestock. And that is certainly true in organic agriculture. And so I just want to share a couple of thoughts about that with you today. In terms of the role of livestock in improving soil health, from our Glenlee study, we definitely see that integrated systems of crops and livestock have resulted in the best soil health outcomes. And we've been measuring that for many years, and there's a number of publications which people can look at. Doug, I'm just going to ask you, the top of that slide cut off, is that just on my screen?
The top line I see is conventional agricultural pathways.
Okay, good. Thanks. So it's just on my screen. So I want to start my talk with two sort of framing slides, two thoughts. When we look at conventional agricultural pathways, they really begin with fossil fuels. Whether we're talking about fossil fuels to make pesticides or to make fertilizer or to mine fertilizer. And that's not a bad thing. That's just the circumstance that exists. And that has resulted in an awful lot of specialization. And we're trying to integrate more. But the organic agricultural system has a very different pathway. It requires an integrated approach. And Shear et al. Called the idea of not just crop livestock integration, but integration of function. What can the livestock do in that system to really help it function? And we've taken that all the way to actually looking at humans as livestock and linking cities to agriculture. So that's a contrast between conventional and organic systems, is their pathways, at least for successful systems, are very different. The second sort of introductory slide comes from Gleesman's agroecology textbook, where he describes how do you get to a sustainable agriculture. And it starts off with, will increase the efficiency of conventional practices. And we spend an awful lot of time there. We spend an awful lot of research money there. The level 2 is to substitute conventional practices with alternative ones. So that could be like organic 1.0, where instead of using a herbicide to control weeds, we improve our crop rotation and maybe use some novel piece of tillage. But what I want to talk about is level 3, and that is redesigning the system so that it functions on the basis of a new set of ecological relationships. And this really requires livestock, but it also requires the people who understand the livestock. And on the top left, we've got a rancher talking to students. We need voices from many different contexts. So those are two sort of introductory thoughts. Now, I want to give you some examples, and this may seem a little corny, but I'm holed up here at home, so I've got way too much time to think. And so I decided to make this into a Netflix series and let the animals tell their story about how they can integrate. Well, the first episode, the season opener, is called This Old Prairie. And I love the image at the bottom left. This is very old. It's over 100 years old. And it was taken in Nebraska by Weaver, who was a famous ecologist. And it describes how the prairie actually has very deep perennial roots. And I think we all know how livestock can help us maintain those perennials in the landscape, but there's been a lot of slippage. We've replaced a lot of perennial high producing pastures with silage corn, which doesn't root nearly as deep. So Myra Van D did her master's with me looking at operations that only fed their livestock herbage. And we asked the question, were these farms more reliant on perennials than other livestock operations? And what we found is that the beef farms in Manitoba, over 60% of the land base on those farms was in perennial. And that compares to about 30% for typical beef cow-calf operations in Canada. And these dairy operations were 100% perennial. So that's quite interesting. Now, one of the criticisms that I hear every time I mention this is, well, the animals are going to take longer to mature, and so they're going to produce more methane. And so, yep, maybe we need to think about changing that animal or breeding different animals. And the other response I have to that question to myself is that here's an interesting statistic. If we improve the car gas efficiency in the United States by 10%, that would take 20 million acres of corn out of production. And so when we talk about soil health and greenhouse gases in agriculture, I think we need to put it in the context of our entire society, and because these perennials have some value. Okay, episode 2, I'm calling this the atmosphere bacterial affair, because organic farmers rely on fixation. And on the bottom left, here's an organic farmer growing a whole field of legumes for a whole year to enrich the soil with nitrogen. But that's expensive. And what we're seeing more, and it picks up on what Yvonne was saying, is we see more grazing of these full season cover crops. And that has really transformed the economics of this organic system. Plus, it's offered some really interesting summer grazing for the livestock. The next episode, I'm calling this Pigs in Space. And because pigs have a particular space in the landscape, they like to root. And in organic agriculture, we have the need for alternative weed control tools. And if you look at the picture on the upper left, pigs can be managed in fields with a strand of electric quite effectively. And so, in fact, we've even taken this so far as working with a southern Manitoba pasture pig operator and selecting potato genotypes which follow that pig pasture. So where the potatoes are this year, that was a pig pasture last year. And the farmer, Terry, is selecting among a diverse set of genotypes of potatoes to see which variety works best in that system. The next item, the next episode focuses on composting. And if we look at composting on the left with a nice compost turner and the tractor, that works fine, nothing wrong with that. It's a really important part of organic agriculture right now. But it does use diesel fuel. It does use those fossil fuels. And the animals can also do this. And pigs, it may sound like a really crazy idea, but there are farmers who are using the pigs to actually turn their compost. And there's many strategies of doing that by infecting the manure pack with corn seeds to have them ferment, and the pigs will go find them and will in the process compost the pile. So Animals can do so many things. Episode 5, I'm calling Great Bags of Fire. And I came to this looking at some anaerobic digestion examples in small scale farming in central Alberta, central America. But I want to get us thinking about anaerobic digestion and other parts of the circular nutrient economy within Canada. The example at the bottom is from Lethbridge Biogas, where dairy manure is put through these anaerobic digesters, producing digestate, nutrient-rich digestate, which is actually being used on the 3-gen organic farm in Ontario. Or food waste, which can be processed by insects, which as a byproduct produce very interesting frass, which has interesting fertility properties. And so this speaks to the circular economy. And Jess Nixie has just finished her master's looking at circular nutrients for supplying phosphorus and closing urban to rural nutrient cycles in organically managed cropping systems. We are thinking about this, not just taking the nutrients from the animals to the farm, but taking those nutrients back to the city and then back and forth, so sharing nutrients. And of course, humans are animals as well, and we are part of this system. And I would submit that organic agriculture is pioneering the whole idea of nutrient sharing between rural and urban areas. Episode 6, A Dog's Life. I understand that people are more interested in dogs now since we've had COVID and people have got these pets. But sometimes I wonder if the life of these dogs is really as interesting as it could be. And so a number of years ago, we visited a vineyard in California and visited these dogs who were being used to detect pests within the grape vines. And some of you may know the story, and you can go and look at this later on. But dog is an animal that we don't often associate with sort of crop livestock integration, but they have a role to play. And it's not just in California. This is now happening on the prairies in Canada, where dogs have been trained to look for clubroot in canola. And when I look around my department and I see the cost of all the diagnostic equipment that we're using and the maintenance that it requires, I think some of that can be done by these dogs. And so, that's another form of integration. And the final episode is on the question of scaling up. How do we make, for example, this system which is used in Asia that has rice and fish and azolla, which is that fern growing on the surface, which fixes nitrogen, and ducks growing together. How do we scale that up? Well, I would just invite people to visit some examples that are quite easy to find on the internet. For example, Lundberg rice farms in California, they've been integrating with migrating waterfowl for quite some time as a way to provide services for their soil health. Or here's a farm in Montana. This is a 9,000 acre organic farm, which has recently, through a very interesting relationship with young people who work as interns, integrated livestock into their cropping system for soil health. So I just like to leave you with this slide. I don't think I have time to explain it, but when I think about crop livestock integration, I've had the experience of thinking of working on this for quite some time, and I can see now that we're way beyond just adding forages to the rotation and having livestock or applying livestock manure to farm fields. Of course, that's going to continue. That's really important. But the integration of function, I think, is the new frontier, and it's going to be very exciting. Thank you very much.